Hi there, good evening. It's Journal 31, I think, and T+25. Um, let's make sure, just for the grins and giggles of it. Yep, that's correct. It is the 27th of April, and I'd like to ask you to indulge me in a journey through the creepies and the crevices of my convoluted mind. Um, After being admonished not to talk about topical things too much, but it's interesting. This has to do with the nursing staff at the city. Actually, it has to do with the entire staff at the City of Hope, uh, which is as diverse as anything I've ever seen before in my life. I stopped asking people what their countries of origin were because the numbers were just too great to keep track of. Uh, and Leslie and I were talking at dinner, and I've always said, unless your name is White Cloud or Running Deer, you came here from somewhere else. And that's important to remember. I mean, I was raised in New York, in Brooklyn, in an Italian Jewish neighborhood. Alongside it was a German neighborhood, a Polish neighborhood, an Irish neighborhood. Uh, and I couldn't, I've never been able to get this one thought out of my mind. I was babysitting, so you know how long ago that was. Um, Still lived in New York, and Jack Paar was on. Um, for those of you who are younger, look him up. You'll find him on YouTube, I'm sure. You'll find everybody on YouTube, including me, I guess. Um, there was a comedian at the time named Sam Levenson. He was a teacher in the New York City school system, and he was a humorist. I don't know that it would be fair to call him a comedian because he wasn't a comedian in a typical sense. He was a humorist. He found things that were interesting and funny about common life. May have been one of the very first observational comedians around. But Parr asked him. He wrote several books, and Parr had asked him, how is possible that his parents, who were immigrants from Eastern Europe, um, managed to get, I think it was 7 kids through college, all 7, uh, speaking little or no English. And I'll never forget the answer. I'll just never forget the answer because it made so much sense to me based upon where we lived, where we were in the world, what my experience was up until that point, which was obviously limited. Uh, uh, he said that his mother, and by the way, as a school teacher, he was he was on the bottom end of the socioeconomic ladder of college graduates within his family, within his 6 or 7 brothers and sisters. Um, he said that his mother told them from the time they were very little uh, that the only way to go from being undesirable within a society or a culture was to become indispensable. And it was like this lightning flash of illumination came to me, to my 14, 15-year-old uh, psyche, because that was the imprint of the neighborhood that I grew up in Brooklyn. Um, Italians came, restaurants, barbershops, and I'm not being funny because um, that was merely a step. That was merely the rung on the ladder that got them started towards upward mobility. Um, Irish came, mostly cops, constables on patrol. Um, and you can go on and on and on and look at how everyone found their way into and through the American dream. Um, when it was still viable. If you were to come with me to the City of Hope and we were to walk through Browerman, if we were to go to the phlebotomy lab, or we were to go to the VAD room where I get my blood drawn because I have a PICC line, I have an internal line. If you were to come up with me on the 6th floor and have an opportunity to experience, and by the way, I'm not suggesting that you go through a transplant to do this. You can just witness it. The transplant, as we've talked about before, is quite an experience. But if you were to take a look at the demographics of the staff, the entire staff, from the West Wing 6th floor receptionist or secretary to the PCAs, the patient care advocates, to the nursing staff, you could not wrap your head around the number of countries of origin from which I would say the vast majority of them came. All over the world, from all over the world. South America, Central America, across, I mean, the whole depth and breadth of Asia, Europe, and of course the United States. Of course, we had Americans by birth interspersed with that, but the patient care ratio is really low, which means that there are lots more people, and those people were all unbelievable. I mean, they were unbelievably competent. They were unbelievably caring. They were unbelievably attentive, professional. It's really hard. It's really hard to find the right words to talk about how, and that goes from people who are obviously not born here and are either in the process of becoming naturalized or are naturalized, or in some cases perhaps were born here, but spoke a second language at home. I think without politicizing this whole discussion of immigration and what have you, and I'm gonna just say that my grandparents on both sides came here legally, came through Ellis Island, and many of the people that I know came here legally. But the fact that we should be focusing on is that, for the most part, these waves of immigration, each and almost every one of them, have made us stronger because the people who are involved in them are working so hard towards a better future and a better life for their children and their children's children. So when this discussion of immigration, legal or otherwise, comes up, we really need to understand that what makes the news is the unusual, the extraordinary, the bizarre, the strange, the abnormal. That's what makes the news. Like Leslie likes to say, if it bleeds, it leads. But the converse of that has to be true, right? And that is that what's normal, what is the life, the reality, the current reality that we share, is that the vast majority of these people that have come here for a better life contribute deeply. I wouldn't have traded one of the PCAs. I wouldn't have traded one of my nurses, one of my doctors. I wouldn't have traded one of them for anything. They were all superb, and I think we need to recognize and recognize that. And I think we also need to consider who our people were, where they came from, how and why they came here, before we rush to judgment on these other areas. You know, you may not agree with me politically, but I think philosophically there's space there for a discussion that we can both agree on. And with that happy note, I think it's time. Thank you for sharing the evening with me. I appreciate the fact that you've chosen to give me a couple of minutes of your time, and I really appreciate the opportunity for the discussion that comes out of it. Stay well, take care. Know that Leslie and I care deeply about all of you. Bye-bye.